Two Guzzis, both alike in dignity, in fair Inverary where we lay our scene. Ancient Eldorado against upstart Brever. Which wins favour? Which will be our queen? Since there are two Guzzis in my garage, I thought it might be fun to use identical trips on each to talk about their various characteristics and strengths. It's not really a competition. Both have their place, and while they share many things in common, their heritage, the place they were made, the layout of their engines, the name on the tank, they are vastly different beasts. And it certainly wasn't a race. I'm no speeder. I just rode both bikes over the same short section of road to remind myself how each feels and responds to different road surfaces and road conditions. But as you'll see if you persevere to the end of the video, things don't always turn out the way you might expect. So let's begin by talking about the differences between the two bikes. It's a bit like trying to compare apples and zucchinis, or radishes and bananas. They're so different. Both have transverse V-twin engines. Superficially they look similar, but inside there's a world of difference. The Eldorado's 850 has heavy pistons and a massive 18-pound flywheel clutch assembly. The engine likes to take its time to rev up, which isn't a bad thing, as it gives the clunky agricultural gearbox a chance to catch up. But those weighty engine bits give traction engine-like torque. The Brever's 1100cc engine is totally modern inside, with many lightened and refined parts, which allow it to spin up quickly and produce vastly more power. And the Brever's gearbox is wonderfully quick, needing only the slightest tickle on the lever to snick into the next gear. Brakes? Yes, both bikes have brakes, but that's about where the similarity ends. As one might expect, the Brever has modern disc brakes, twin discs with Brembo 4-piston calipers on the front and a single twin-piston rear disc. The Eldorado? Drum brakes all around. Before you roll your eyes, let me tell you, the 4-leading shoe front brake that I grafted on from a 1974 bike is a beast. When you first pull the lever, nothing much happens, but give it a good squeeze and it can make that front tire squeal. The rear is a single leading shoe drum, which also works quite well, as long as it's not raining. I replaced the shoes about 100,000 miles ago, and they still show no noticeable wear. The handling too is different. Riding the Brever, you sit within the bike in a nicely neutral posture with a slight forward lean. Think of leaning the bike and it immediately responds, instantly transferring thought into action. It's stable and comfortable, neither reluctant to turn nor wanting to fall in. The suspension is, what's the best way to describe it? Forgettable. By that I mean that after a few moments you no longer give it a thought. It absorbs bumps and smooths the ride like it's supposed to, but without providing any surprises. The bike is smooth, responsive and modern feeling, without the unnecessary complication of multiple modes and electronically controlled suspension. It just works well. The Eldorado, on the other hand, feels like a 50-year-old bike. You sit on top, and at first, especially if you've just ridden something more modern, it feels wiggly. The riding position's standard. Imagine one of those dressage horse riders, and you get the idea. Feet below and slightly back from the knees, straight back, hands resting lightly on the bars. It's all day comfortable. The Brever has a fat rear tyre which I suspect contributes to the stable handling. The Eldorado's skinny tyres, especially running the budget dual sport tyres I favour, contribute to its very light steering. But after you've ridden it for a while, it starts to feel less disconcerting. The Eldo's rudimentary suspension does its job, sort of, and it's been a long time since I bottomed out the forks, even when hitting large potholes. On rough ground, the bike will dance around a little, but you get used to it. Both bikes are all-day comfortable. The aftermarket Corbin seat on the Brever is firm and supportive. On a recent trip I started to get a bit stiff after 11 hours in the saddle, but I can hardly blame Corbin for that. The seat on the Eldorado is more or less just a plank of vinyl-covered foam. It doesn't feel particularly comfortable at first, but I'm so used to it now that I rarely give it a thought. Many people fuss with motorcycle seats, trying to get a perfect fit. But really, if you ride enough miles, you eventually get inured to the discomfort. If you've been watching carefully, you may have noticed that even though the video of the two bikes started at the same place and time, the Eldorado has gradually crept further and further ahead. I wasn't conscious of riding it any faster, it just turned out that way. Indeed, I was trying to ride the road at the same speed so that the two video segments would be compatible. The Brever is by far the faster bike, more powerful engine, better brakes, better suspension, more secure feeling handling. There's no question that had I been racing myself, the Brever would have finished miles ahead. You might assume that it would be the one to eat up the distance more quickly, yet turn by turn, the Eldorado inched ahead. I can only assume that because I've ridden so many miles on the Eldorado, despite its skinny wheels, budget knobbly tyres and less powerful engine, I'm more in tune with the machine. If I enter a corner a little too fast that turns out to be tighter than I expect, I just lean more. I trust it. Experience has taught me that when the chips are down, I can rely on its handling. Which leads me to another observation. Whether I'm riding the Brever, my 1986 Suzuki Cavalcade, the Eldorado, or even driving a car, I tend to cover roughly the same distance in a day, and take roughly the same amount of time to do it. Despite being over 50 years old, the Eldorado gobbles miles easily, and doesn't exact any penalty, either for its age or its basic and old-tech mechanicals. On a way back from a trip last year, I stopped at a coffee shop just outside Fredericton, New Brunswick, noticing a large white police van backing into the parking space next to my bike. Many hours and over 500 miles later, I was filling the Eldorado's fuel tank at a gas station just inside the Ontario border when the same van pulled up on the opposite side of the pumps. "I saw you at Tim's near Fredericton," the officer said, looking with amazement at the bike. "You've made good time." I hadn't been racing. I'd just been plodding along, riding in the general vicinity of the speed limit, while most other vehicles went sailing past. But here's the thing. I just kept rolling, stopping only for fuel and the occasional bite of food. Old bikes can do the distance. As for which is the queen, I'll leave that for you to decide. All my motorcycle books are available on Amazon or Audible in digital, paperback and audiobook formats. Please search for Nick Adams Motorcycle. Thanks for watching.